Welcome back to the Afterword, a conversation about the future of words. We're glad to have Dr. Marian Chertow of Yale University and Jes Sdao of Spartanburg County here with us to continue our conversation about the background stories about trash. What happens to our garbage after it leaves our house, and how does that affect the entire world? So let's take a positive turn here. After we've laid out a lot of the problems around solid waste management. Let's take a positive turn and look at the possibilities that trash offers. That we talked last time about China and some other countries that have been helping manage global trash, and they're kind of turning away from that right now. So what are some ways the U.S. and other countries can help solve the world's trash problem?
Well, we do have the consumption issue, where people are buying a lot and not really thinking about what is known in the business as end of life. And where does it go once the consumer doesn't want to be using it anymore? And one solution that I think is simple and interesting, I've seen it work in Sweden actually, is what some people are now calling colored bags. So imagine in your house or your apartment, you separate your waste because you have 4 or 5 bags in your bin, and let's say the paper is going into the green bag and the newspaper is going into the yellow bag and the aluminum cans are going in a pink bag, and so depends on the city, but they can choose what 4 or 5 or 6 things that they want to have sorted in the kitchen. But imagine when all these bags hit the street and everyone has their yellow and their orange and their blue and their green, all of those get sent to the material recovery facility, to the MRF, and they're using light. They run all the bags up a conveyor belt, and then the green bags are able to rejoin themselves without the other colors by using what we call optical sorting. And it works pretty well. And when that's all over with, then you have what you need, sorted waste. Sorting is the key to all of this, I think. And that way you can bring all the newspaper to the newspaper dealer, the plastics to the plastic dealer. And because it never really touches the other parts of the waste, we don't have those contamination problems. And it's not even high tech anymore to have optical sorting. It's become normal. So I really like that system. Not only that, but the company that I spoke with, it's called OptiBag, actually sent some of the paper, kept it on their campus, and would process it even a little further. They didn't just process it so they could take it to 200 miles away to a manufacturing plant, but they would improve it a little bit more by putting it together and having the organic waste separately, and maybe you could do other things there that help to prepare the plastics, for example, for reuse. So I think that the colored bag thing would be the way that I would first want to start to try to solve the processing problem.
I like that. That's kind of what I was talking about earlier, with something that makes it easy for me as the trash producer to responsibly deal with it. Yeah. Jes, what do you think?
I think that there's a lot of opportunity with green technology, a lot of opportunity for innovation as far as not just how we handle these materials and how we process them. I would also agree with what Marian said, that sorting and separating is very helpful, and going to a dual or single stream system, which was the way of the future back in the early 2000s, it actually backfired on us. So finding that technology to help us process that material is great, but also green technology in the sense of innovating new ways to use those products. So there's certain things that you can do with a water bottle, and beyond that little bit of technology, nobody really knows what else they can do with it. And styrofoam being a huge problem. You can't recycle styrofoam in almost any municipal program. It certainly can be processed, but is there an innovative way to handle it? In addition to that type of innovation, the innovation of packaging that is sustainable in the first place, I think there's a lot of possibility for how we handle waste from its inception to its end of life. By the same token, I would also argue that our cultures play a huge role in how we handle waste. And when a consumer is purchasing something, they see a recycling symbol, even if they're a conscious consumer and they're really looking for, hey, can I recycle this? You might see a symbol on there and think automatically it can be recycled. But that goes back to wish cycling. In many places, that particular material cannot be processed. It can't be recycled, and it requires a specialized niche market. So just seeing a recycle symbol doesn't really mean anything. And so education is a huge way. It's an opportunity to educate people on how waste is handled so that the consumer, when they're purchasing something, becomes an educated consumer and becomes somebody that is not just conscious of recycling, but conscious of why, how, what.
I'd like to jump in with just a little story to add on to that. Something that you said reminded me. A friend of mine some years ago, who's a minister in the Presbyterian Church, she was attending an event of female Presbyterian ministers, and they requested the housekeeping staff not to bring water bottles into the rooms because they were trying to be environmentally sensitive and not have all these single-use plastic bottles. So among the housekeeping staff, word spread that Presbyterian women ministers don't drink water. They only drink alcohol because the alcohol was disappearing and the water bottles were requested to stay out. So they weren't sure whether that really worked like they wanted it to or not. But
oh, Holland, I think this sounds like a marketing issue, right? I mean, woo, there's that education piece. Oh my goodness, that's great. Oh gosh. So, Jes, what generates the most garbage? You know, you mentioned the fact that, you know, I can look on a bottle of something and see that little recyclable sign and think, yay, I'm doing the right thing. But what is the biggest ticket that creates the most garbage besides human beings, which we know we are the greatest producers? Okay. All right. That's enough said. We know that.
As far as the average landfill, you're looking at plastics. Excuse me. I misspoke. As far as the average landfill, you're looking at food waste and yard waste. Those are going to be about 25% of the average landfill, with literally every other municipal solid waste component representing the other 75%. I would say mixed paper and cardboard would come second to food waste and yard waste. So paper, cardboard, we don't realize, and especially now, the EPA's numbers for the average landfill were updated in 2012, but I have not seen newer numbers. So I'm operating just off of a 2012 statistic. On the onset of online ordering, shipping things, Amazon, things like that, you see a lot of packaging. And that cardboard packaging many times is made from recycled materials, but can also be recycled. And so I think between food waste and between paper and cardboard, those are going to be your two biggies. But in the average home, a lot of times it would be plastic and paper. So when it comes to what has the biggest impact, paper a lot of times comes from paper comes from maintained forests that are planted specifically for the paper industry. And because of that, they're more sustainable than, say, plastic, which comes from oil, a non-renewable resource. Trees are, at the very least, renewable, even if it takes a little bit of time. And with plastics, we can't manufacture quality new plastics. We can't take a water bottle and make a new water bottle. The technology exists, but it's used very, very rarely. Whereas with paper, you can recycle paper into more paper. So, I mean, it depends on how you look at it. I would caution, or I would recommend that any resident or business that's looking to start a recycling program or improve their recycling program do a waste audit. And in the upstate, I am available among many of my peers and counterparts. We're all available to assist with a waste audit. I think that knowing what you have makes a big difference, because different households, different companies, they're going to make different types of waste. So, you can go off of averages all day long, but in my house, food waste is certainly not 25% of the waste that I make. I don't even cook. So.
Okay. But what, you mentioned a little bit, Marian, about these new things, this optical sorting. How does AI and the Internet of Things help manage global trash? That was fascinating to me.
So this is really a work in process. And I mentioned one of my research projects. The other one is about robots in MRFs. So we have a lot of people, and maybe Jess and I should make this clear, that in a material recovery facility, there's a lot of hand sorting that goes on, even to this day. Sure, if something's a metal can or a steel can, that a magnet can pick it off the line. But a lot of these mixed things have been requiring humans to do the separations, and so they wear gloves. There's conveyor belts with tons of stuff going by. I know this is audio only, but you should show a little MRF photo or video if you could. Because you have to kind of see it to believe it, the way it's all rushing by. And the issue about robots is really that there are a lot of occupational health problems in these recycling facilities. Some people are very good at it and they don't have so many injuries, but if you look at a list from OSHA or something of what causes injuries, this industry is something that has a higher degree of accidents. Sharps and needles are often can be in the waste, and anything can be in the waste. But even with that, and you don't want to get stabbed by a syringe in the middle of your day, but the occupational people tell me that it's really the repetitive motion that's still the biggest occupational hazard. So we have all these things going on. How can we try to address them? And, some people are scared about the word automation. I know I've been worried about it all my life just because you hear about it in science fiction movies. But now here it is. We've had some presidents of robot recycling companies come to Yale and talk to us and tell us what they're up to and what the benefits are. And AI, you mentioned, Amy, that you wanted to talk about artificial intelligence, is really part of the package with the robots. And with respect to Internet of Things, what we understand is if these robots become the norm, and they're in the early stages, but there's more and more of them coming out every day, then pretty soon you won't even need the maintenance people or this and that. How do you know if we need maintenance? Well, the coordinator can see that there is, but also the monitors can tell you that there's a problem. Or the artificial intelligence system can say, well, we see that we're getting more cardboard on Mondays than we are on the rest of the week. So now we need to put another person on that part of the line or another robot onto the line. But sooner or later, there will be more and more automation because of innovation. And so as an old recycler myself, I don't know. I can see that it's important to have good jobs that are well supported and that pay well. And there are several MRFs, many MRFs who do all that, but others not so much. That the profit motive has its ups and downs. And some people say, well, it's hard to retain the workers. The ones who are paid a lot, think they're happy to stay. But all these things are what we're seeing playing out in this question that you've asked about the way automation will interface with recycling and waste facilities.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And then, that just kind of leads in. We did an episode our very first year on artificial intelligence. And, so it will be productive. We will need more people who can manage the robots and manage the artificial intelligence, because there's always going to be something that needs to be adjusted or fixed. So the human element is still going to be there. So that's kind of exciting.
Well, it's there, but the numbers are look like they're going to be a lot less. We have the grant that we have from the National Science Foundation on this topic required that we have an organizational psychologist on the team, to think about the labor issues in addition to the, mechanical, electrical issues.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah, and you'll have to have her on. She's great. And she's concerned that, yes, there will be some jobs, but not nearly what we have now. And maybe new inventions will come along that need other people, but all of this, I think, has to be studied carefully and thoughtfully. But of course, the market sees the robots and wants to jump right ahead. So,
right. We'll see.
That's good too. So this is just kind of laying out the landscape.
Yeah, fascinating. Wow.
I know we had planned a question here about recycling, but I think Jes already talked a lot about that. So, but there is something else you mentioned, Jes, that I was interested in hearing more about, and that's food waste. What are some solutions AI might be bringing for food waste, Marian?
Well, food waste is a really interesting part of the waste stream because, as Jes said, there's so much of it when you count the food waste and the yard waste and the leaves and all that sort of thing. But it doesn't last long. It breaks down. Whereas the steel cans and the aluminum foil, that doesn't break down while it's in any short period of time. So it really would increase the total recycling and composting of the United States, for example, if we could just deal with the food waste and the yard waste, because it's such a large percentage and it's heavy. Remember that when we talk about all these things, we're talking about weight. So plastic, while some people think it's evil, it doesn't weigh very much. Steel cans weigh more. So, but when we think about this together, I think we could boost our recycling from about the 33% that we have now, according to the US EPA, by 15 or 20% more if we just did this obvious thing of keeping the leaves, for example, separately, and bag them and then put them into some kind of a controlled breakdown facility. A lot of these are called soil amendments or compost and so forth. And that would be great. And there's lots and lots of experimentation going on right now with what we call organic waste, these waste streams that we've enunciated. And I'm very optimistic that we'll be able to find a use for these organic wastes. But the important thing is not to let them get contaminated, not to put the plastic with the natural waste and to keep that separate and so forth. Now people are working on biodegradable plastics, but that hasn't gone very far. I have a professor at my school who's just thought of, well, maybe if we can't make biodegradable plastics, what if we use wood fibers? That's cellulosic, right? And so there is the experimentation going on. The markets will change over time. Just hope they change quickly enough so that we don't increase our waste problem much more.
Wow. Jes, you wanted to jump in?
I just wanted to add a little note on the compostable plastics that a lot of people see in restaurants. Those compostable plastics are made from, usually it's a corn or starch-based plastic. It feels like a plastic water bottle. It's got that same consistency. The number on the bottom is usually a number 7 PLA. those cannot be composted in a backyard bin, and they cannot be recycled in a typical curbside recycling program. And so it's very important to note that if you're making that decision, it's great as a consumer to make the call to purchase that type of material or to get your coffee to go in that type of container. But end of life is considered in that. Don't throw it in the recycling bin. It becomes a contaminant, and don't throw it in the compost bin out in your backyard because it's not going to break down properly. It does need to go to a commercial composter. So that's another element where technology and how we handle that and what type of material we're using to make that type of plastic. That wood cellulose would probably biodegrade in your outside backyard compost bin much easier than it would the plant plastic.
Who knew, Holland? Who knew? I mean,
I did not.
This is so good. All right. So Jess, you've kind of stepped into this a little bit. So I'm going to toss this sheet to you first. So you've kind of talked about, when I buy that little plastic yogurt container and I look at the top and it's got that little recycle thing on it, the little triangle, I'm like, oh, yay, I can recycle this. But maybe not. Or I, get that certain type of a straw and no, maybe that's not recyclable either. So could the U.S. get into waste management in a big way? And if they do, what is going to have to change for those entrepreneurs?
So I think from my perspective, technically speaking, yes, we could certainly get into a more substantial way of managing waste like that. We could do large-scale government-funded composting facilities where a resident can buy their compostable materials and they go to the coffee shop, they get their compostable straw, their compostable plant plastic, iced coffee cup, and then they can sort it and separate it along with the rest of their curbside or recycling center materials. However, even at the local level, even a government-funded program like that, you're still looking at essentially a single-use product. And I would say that the idea is that we want to get away from those as much as possible. So while the United States as a whole can certainly help spur the innovation to take those materials and do something with them and make it easy on the public to do that, I also fear that we've done that so much that now we're faced with a literal mountain of garbage, if not an ocean of garbage, that we've made everything so easy and so convenient, partially due to government funding, government sponsorship of these types of programs. If we made it more difficult, then the consumer might be more willing to look at what they're purchasing and make a more, what I call, wise use decision when it comes to what they're buying and how they're going to wind up handling it at the end. If we keep giving large beverage companies money to keep manufacturing single-use plastics, then they're going to keep doing it. So while the recycling industry is very happy to take that PET plastic and do something with it, that's wonderful that there are companies willing to buy it. But what happens if we don't make it at all? If we make no trash, then we don't have to worry about landfill space. You then run into the issue of what are these companies going to do for source material, but they survived before recycling got bigger, before our consumer culture got substantial, and they will continue to survive because of innovation.
Okay. What do you say to that, Marian?
Well, I'm very intrigued by this. It's actually been a running theory for me for the last 2 years that some countries are better at recycling than we are, and they're more willing to sort and so forth. But we're really good at entrepreneurship. And you just used that word, Amy, so I think you're onto something. My own thinking is that everything comes down to sorting. Once we put everything mushed together, we kind of lose the ball game. But I've seen a lot of young entrepreneurs who want to go after one portion of the waste stream. They want to get the shoes because they think they can do something with the shoes. Clothes is a really big thing that we barely reuse at all. Most of it, over 80% goes into landfill. And if we could just get these, I think these entrepreneurs are very interested in seeing what can they make money with, what part of the stream, cans. We talked about food waste, cardboard. If once you can isolate something, then you can find the market, and that's always been true. It's also true that recycling prices go up and down and up and down. It's like a sine wave, right? The costs stay the same, but the prices go up and down according to commodity markets. And so knowing that, it seems like it would just be a better way to do it, to try to get some more innovation, more practical products that are made. We've seen toothbrushes that are made out of plastics and so forth. And some of these are too small to be a big, to be a really count in our economy, but some of them can get bigger and bigger. And I think that's how it's going to happen in the U.S. I think it's going to take longer. I think there'll be a lot of failures before there's a lot of successes, but I see this kind of in the wind. I mean, you can go to Eileen Fisher online now and buy her used clothing, and they put it on the internet, and you can purchase it for half price and feel like a genius because you didn't pay $100 for it. You only paid $50 for it. So there's so much of this kind of innovation that I think I'm excited about that. I'm excited that people are wanting to use these materials again and do something substantial. And that's how I hope it goes.
I hope so too. I think that one thing that I'm taking away from our conversation is this idea of contamination. I don't think I ever really considered how you cannot use all of my lovely cardboard, because I do break down all my cardboard and I do take it to the recycling center myself because I do not have a curb pickup. I do compost all of my household food waste and leaves and all that kind of stuff. But to think that my lovely cardboard that I've taken the time to sort has gone in with somebody else's junk and now contaminated it and it can't be used, then I feel like I've just defeated. So I really appreciate both of your ideas on getting away from single-use products and this idea of sorting. I love that.
So we have a signature question we'd like to end every topic with, and that's the question of a metaphor. What's a metaphor to help us understand the politics and supply chains of global garbage?
So I know you guys are all excited, so just go ahead and jump in with this grand metaphor.
I'm thinking that the one thing that I would like to say is I want to say if you build it, they will come, as far as opportunities to recycle and the accessibility for recycling. But at the same time, that also goes back to the we're playing into not incentivizing, reducing, reusing. So waste not, want not might play in there a little bit. So for me, I'm not really sure that I have a metaphor so much as I have a picture, is that, as my mother used to say and continues to say this to this day, when it comes to land, God ain't making any more of it. And when it comes to managing materials, landfills take up a lot of space and they ain't making any more land. So you can look at the United States as a whole and think we have these Woody Guthrie vast expanses of land, and no longer we have a booming population. We have people that are all over the entire country, and it's up to all of us to pay attention to what we're doing and look to future generations. We are stewards of the environment. We are stewards of our future and our future generations. And it's up to us to do our part to take care of that kind of thing. I'm sorry that that's not a great metaphor.
It's a great picture because that's what a metaphor is. A metaphor is just a picture.
Good enough.
What
about you, Marian?
Let's see. See, I didn't think of this one. Let's see. I know what I'm tempted to say.
It can be edited. I'd say go with it.
Yeah, right. Thanks. So the research area that I'm really my first love is what we call industrial symbiosis. And what industrial symbiosis means is that if you're in an industrial park or some kind of a business cluster, that one company's waste really can become another company's feedstock. And what this means is that whether it's energy, if one company's letting off steam, another company needs steam. Water reuse, especially wastewater reuse, can be used in certain parts of energy production. Materials, there's the opportunities don't end for one company's material that they don't need can become a product in another nearby company. So what this all says to me is that this is a way of never even making the waste, because you work together, you get to know each other, your kids play soccer together, and there's a community to this in places all over the world that have this kind of local trust and are willing to, even at the business level, enable the fact that that you're a coal-fired power plant. That's like the dirt, something dirty. We can take the pollution control remains, which is called calcium sulfate or gypsum, and make gypsum board right next door. And so what is a waste in so many other places is really quite useful. So that's kind of the picture that I would present. And this is done, as Jes said, from culture to culture a little bit differently, but that's something to celebrate. We're not all the same, and our economies aren't all the same, and so forth. But this idea of one company's waste becoming another company's food is what I've spent most of my time on in the last 20 years. And it's very interesting, very exciting, very hopeful. And, but again, with all the caveats that we be careful, that it be safe, and that it doesn't break the bank. And
sure.
We've seen a lot of that.
Yeah. Wow. This is so good. I love these last pictures of considering our environment through garbage. Thank you all so much. This has been a great, great conversation, Holland.
Yes, it is. And if people want to continue this conversation or learn more on this topic, Marian, how can someone reach out to you?
Well, for better or worse, I'm in print a lot. That's what professors do. They publish or perish. So as long as you know how to spell my name, you can find me in Google very easily. And there's a lot of recordings that I've done, and a couple of other podcasts or webinars. And I think that would be a nice way to meet.
Wonderful. Jes, if anybody wants to get in touch with you or learn more about recycling, reusing, waste management in Spartanburg County.
I'm also very Googleable. That's the benefit of having the last name Sdao. I am the only Jes Sdao that you can find in South Carolina, if not in the entire world. So Googling me, you'll find I did a podcast about glass specifically. Amy, you would probably be interested in that since you asked about that. And then a lot of other writings, but you can also find my work email address and phone number and things like that. I'm in the process of going from one email address to the other. So right now, I'm not going to give my email because it would be defunct in a couple of weeks. So yeah, just Googling.
Thank you.
Well, join us next week. And first of all, just before we wrap this up, Holland, was it worth the wait? We waited 3 years to talk about garbage. Was it worth it? I don't know if we lost Holland, but I know for me, it was worth the wait. And thank you so much to Marian and Jes. This has been such a delight. We've enjoyed this very, very timely conversation. This is something that I think we're right on the bubble in our world, in our environment. So thank you all so much. And join us next week as we talk about new global entrepreneurs. So this may have a nice segue from some of the things that Marian was talking about. One person's garbage becomes another person's gain as we think about global entrepreneurship. Thank you so much, Jes and Marian. And for all of our listeners, please make sure that you become a subscriber to theafterwordpodcast.com. It does help us keep the conversations going. And as always, you are welcome at our table.